When we created the movie's controller in Visual Studio, what we received was a controller that already had details, create, and edit actions. And you'll notice when it comes to create, there are actually two versions of this create action. Why are there two? Because this first create responds to an HTTP GET request. When a user says get me/movies/create, what they're requesting is a form or a resource that will allow them to enter the information to create a movie. Once they enter that information, they'll probably click a button that will force the browser to HTTP post that information back to my server. I want it to also come to a create action. How does the MVC runtime differentiate between a GET request and a POST request? You can do that using attributes that you apply to your action methods. So this create action should only respond to HTTP post, and that means if someone issues a GET request for /movies/create, that will reach this action method. As I said, this action method merely needs to return a view that allows a user to edit a new empty movie. So let's go to the movies folder and say add a view. We're going to call this view create. It's going to be a Razor View engine using a movie model, and this time my scaffold template is going to be create. Let's click add. Inside of the create view, you'll notice several new HTML helpers, like html.beginForm, that essentially renders a form method equals post so that everything inside of here, all the input controls, will be posted back to the same URL this came from. In other words, /movies/create. There's also HTML helpers to display model information or display inputs for model information. For instance, html.editor4, that will essentially render an input type equals text, and it will set the initial value of this to whatever is in the title property of the model. For a new movie, we won't have anything, so the input will be blank. Again, the HTML helpers are all about rendering little snippets of HTML. They're just trying to make your job a little bit easier. They're not like server controls, which were really big abstractions that raised events and so forth. They're small abstractions that produce typically a single HTML element. By the way, one of the advantages to having a strongly typed model is that you do get IntelliSense inside of here. Visual Studio knows the type of model you're working against, and it knows it has a rating and a title property. And down here at the bottom of the view, we have our input type equals submit. That will be the button the user clicks on when they're finished entering movie information. Everything will post back to our server. Let's just see if everything's working. I'm going to run the application. We'll go to Movies. I'm going to click Create New. Here's where I can enter a title and a rating, and click Create. And then we redirect back to our list. But notice we didn't add a new movie. Why not? Because we didn't implement anything in the create action that receives that HTTP post. So let's do that next. It will be this create action method that is the destination for our HTTP post. So how will we receive the movie information? Would you believe me if I told you that it was as easy as adding a parameter of type movie to our create action? Hopefully you will, because there's this magical component inside of the MVC runtime known as the model binder. And it is the model binder that I was talking about earlier when I said the MVC runtime goes out in your request and tries to find information to populate parameters for action methods. And when I have a complex parameter like a movie object, what the MVC runtime will do is launch one of these model binders to go out and try to populate that movie object with information it finds in the request, including posted form values. When we render our create view, what we'd find if we looked at the source code is when the text box or the input for this model title is rendered, it's going to render with a name equals title. So the name of that input is going to match the name of our property. That allows the model binder to look at this parameter and say, oh, you need a movie? Let me instantiate one. Now what properties does it have? Oh, it has a title property. Let me see if I can find something named title in the request, and it'll find that in the posted form values. It will also find the rating. So the model binder will build all of that for us. All we need to do is save things. So let's build a repository, and let's call repository.add and pass in this new movie. And if everything works, if there's no exception thrown inside of here, what we'll do is we'll return an action result that tells the ASP.NET Runtime, redirect the browser to the index action of this controller. Otherwise, if something went wrong, let's try to re-render this create view with the same new movie information that the user posted to us, because there must have been something wrong inside of it. We're going to allow them to re-edit that movie information. I'll show you how that works in just a minute, but let's see if this can save our movie information now. Let's go to Movies. Let's create a new movie. We'll just call it Foo with a rating of 12. And we redirect back to the index action, which is /movies, and there's our new movie. The problem right now is that I can create a new movie and not enter any information. Just click Create, and we get a new blank movie. Let's try to fix that problem now. One easy approach to data validation with ASP.NET MVC is to use data annotations. Annotations are attributes that you can apply to properties of your models, attributes like the required attribute. These live in the system.componentModel.data annotations namespace. The required attribute says title must be populated in order for this model to be valid. There's also a range attribute, so I can say the rating has to be between 1 and 4. With those annotations in place, I just need to make a few changes here inside of my controller. I need to check and make sure that model state, the property, is valid. If any of those annotations failed, what the model binder will do is set that flag to false. So we're only going to save the movie if the model state is valid. Else, what we can do, again, we'll return this view, the same create view, and allow the user to edit the movie. And I'm going to use this approach instead of a try-catch, because I don't like to use a try-catch inside of my actions. Let's do Control-K, Control-D to do some formatting. And let's try to run the application again. I'll go to Movies. I've reset my repository state so we don't have the movies that we created earlier, but now let me create a movie called Foo with a rating of 12. And you'll notice we weren't able to do that. The field rating must be between 1 and 4. And we redisplayed the create view so that the user could change this and make a valid rating. Let's also see if we can create an empty movie. Now it turns out that didn't work either. Model state is not valid. And one thing you might have noticed as I do this, every time I click the create button, we're doing a full post back to the server, and all the validation is taking place on the server. That's only because I turned off a flag inside of my application. A new feature in ASP.NET MVC3 is that you can set a flag in your web.config to say, enable client validation. And now if I save everything and we relaunch the application, what we'll find is that when I tried to enter movie information and click the create button, validation is happening instantly on the client. So when I save this to a 3, the validation message instantly goes away. When I type some text into the title field, the validation message instantly goes away. All of this is made possible by jQuery and the jQuery validation plugin.